we begin here in Hong Kong, which is reeling from some of the most dramatic scenes it has seen in years. In the past few hours, tens of thousands of protesters have faced off and clashed with police in the city's central business district. Authorities fired tear gas and pepper spray, with the city's police commissioner calling the demonstration a riot, although a senior superintendent insists that authorities have been as restrained as necessary.
Concerning use of force, I believe that if our officer is not encountering some threat that they are probably may suffer from serious bodily harm, or even our officer think that their life is being threatened, I don't think our officer has any necessity to use any kind of force.
The violence has forced lawmakers to postpone what is at the heart of these protests, a debate on a bill that would allow fugitives or suspected criminals to be extradited to China, a bill that many fear could be abused. Now, Ivan Watson and Matt Rivers are both close to Hong Kong's Legislative Council, the epicenter of today's unrest. And Ivan, let's go to you first. We know that there has been this ongoing clearance operation by police in riot gear. What's the latest on that?
Well, they've succeeded in pushing the protesters back from the headquarters of the city government. But look at the scene here on Queensway, which is one of the most important arteries in the city, just a few blocks from the headquarters of the government. You have riot police out blocking the road. They have, in the last couple of hours, pushed protesters back that are in the distance there in front of one of the city's most posh malls. And then I'm going to spin around, and I'm on a traffic overpass, by the way, Christy, that normally cars would be moving over. Instead, you've got throngs of protesters and bystanders here. And on the other hand side, look at what the police are facing. Thousands of additional protesters standing here in defiance, denouncing the city government for their introduction of this controversial extradition law. The police in this area effectively surrounded by the protesters. Now, a lot of what I'm seeing here reminds me very much of the Occupy sit-in movement that we saw nearly 5 years ago on these same streets. One of the differences is the age of many of the protesters. Some of these people are 20, 21 years old, who say they were children at the time of a nearly 80-day sit-in that took place in these streets 5 years ago. And now they're getting their first taste of civil disobedience here. The protest movement we've seen on Sunday was massive. You witnessed it. There were more than 1 million people out in the streets marching peacefully against this law, organizers say. That's roughly 1 in 7 Hong Kongers. The city government said, we don't care, effectively. We're going to move forward with this legislation, and you simply don't understand the law. And here's the end result, a much more radical reaction that has resulted in clashes in the streets of the city, and we simply don't know where this test of wills will take Hong Kong next. Christy.
Ivan, thank you. Let's go to Matt Rivers, also standing by in the area, the flashpoint of these intense protests earlier today. And Matt, we heard from Ivan getting this sense of deja vu about what happened here in Hong Kong 5 years ago with the outbreak of the umbrella movement protests, kind of repeating itself, but in a much more intense way today. But another big key difference, the opposition to this legislation, much more widespread. What are you hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, the people that are here and kind of engaged in the more violent protests that we've seen throughout the afternoon, I don't think are completely representative of the broader protests that we've seen going back to that 1 million person, according to organizers, march that we saw on Sunday. But the fact remains that, you know, protests did become more violent today, and the people that are here right now down that street behind me in one of Hong Kong's main thoroughfares here right through the financial district, generally they are younger. Now, in terms of what's happening here right now, you can see it's relatively relaxed. We're behind what was the main police line, but these guys are exhausted. They're taking a break for now, and down the road you can see the protesters. There's thousands of people down on Connaught Street down there, and what they've done over the last maybe hour or so is put up those barricades. So they've taken all kinds of metal barricades, they've taken plastic barricades, they've taken bamboo sticks that they've put over top. And so clearly what seems to be happening here is that side is gearing up for this side to try and move them out at some point. You could call this maybe the eye of the storm, Christy, the calm before the storm. The police are not going to let thousands of people stay there forever. And so the question that we have, Ivan mentioned a test of wills. Well, the test of wills in the immediate future here is, when do police decide to do something about all those people that are down there? And when they decide to do something about it, what does that look like?
And your thoughts on the police response? You know, the Hong Kong police that called the events, the action by these protesters, the young people who gathered around the Legislative Council building as a riot. What warranted them, gave them a reason to move in with tear gas and pepper spray and rubber bullets and water cannon?
Well, what they're saying, the justification is that they got stuff thrown at them first. They say that people were trying to get into the Legislative Council building. They said that protesters were throwing stuff at them. And in all kinds, these situations, often, Christy, it's chicken or the egg, right? It's who did what to prompt the other side. And ultimately, we're never really going to know for sure, because the protesters are going to say, no, it wasn't prompted. We didn't deserve it. And the police are going to say, well, we didn't do it for no reason. The protesters started throwing stuff at us. So ultimately, we don't know exactly what's going to have started it. But that just illustrates the tense situation here. You know, yes, it might be relatively relaxed right now, but all it takes is one thing, one brick thrown, one sound that might sound like a tear gas canister, even though it isn't, that gets people going here. It really is a tense standoff, and we're not sure how it's going to play out through the overnight hours here in Hong Kong.
A very tense standoff, and all this taking place right next to the Legislative Council building and near the central business district of this major international financial hub. Matt Rivers reporting live for us. Matt, thank you. Now, throughout the day, we've been talking about how young many of these protesters who were out in force today are. Many of them, in fact, were children during the umbrella movement in 2014. With the government now forced to cancel Wednesday's legislative session, pro-democracy legislator Claudia Mo gave an impassioned speech in front of the crowd. Take a listen.
The young have every right to express their feelings, their anger, their frustration, their resentment in any way they want, because this is their Hong Kong, their future. Now, guys, at the end of the umbrella movement, didn't we say we will be back? And now we are back!
And that was Hong Kong legislator Claudia Mo speaking earlier today. And Claudia Mo joins us now live. Claudia, thank you for joining us. I want to get your reaction to events this day, the protests and the police response. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a proud and sad day for Hong Kong. Proud because we see this display of people power, and in particular the display of young people power, and sad because the police try so hard to conduct this clearance of our youngsters. To call that a riot is a sheer exaggeration. You can tell the absolute majority of the protesters were peaceful, the demonstrators, and they didn't do anything except for sitting down and blocking the road. And we do condemn the Democrats at the legislature, condemn the police for employing excessive force, abuse of force. They didn't need to apply that much force on the young. I mean, 95, I would say, up to 95% of the crowd today were aged under 25.
And that's why you call it a sad day for Hong Kong, because of the police response to those very young protesters today. You also said it was a proud day for Hong Kong. This was before the police moved in on the protesters. That was when, before that operation, you delivered that emotional message to protesters saying, we are back. And tears seemed to come to your eyes. What were you thinking? What were you going through when you uttered those words?
That I was getting a bit emotional because somehow this generation of mine didn't seem have done enough for the young, and it's their future, as we keep reminding ourselves, and they have no choice. At the moment, many Hong Kong people are now talking about emigrating. Just quit Hong Kong. We've had enough of this city. Destination, well, Canada, UK, US, Australia. But what about those young who just can't afford to go, right? And why is this city deteriorating so much? We're being pushed to the brink of precipice, and there's no salvation. Look at the arrogance or the stubbornness as expressed by this Carrie Lam. It's just very saddening.